Where legends breathe again. Eldmyth. God of wine, revelry, and divine madness, Dionysus blurs the line between ecstasy and chaos. What secrets lie behind his celebrations, and how did this enigmatic deity influence the lives of mortals and gods alike? The ancient world whispers its secrets to those who dare to listen. In the rustling leaves of a sacred grove, in the intoxicating perfume of crushed grapes, and in the ecstatic cries of a reveler lost in dance, there echoes the name of a god unlike any other. He is the twice-born, the wanderer, the liberator, and the destroyer. He is Dionysus. More than just the god of wine, he is the embodiment of life's most potent and terrifying forces, the unbridled joy that borders on madness, the creative frenzy that dissolves into chaos, the profound truth found at the bottom of a cup. To understand him is to journey into the heart of the wilderness, both in the world and within the human soul. It is to confront the primal, untamable energy that civilization so often seeks to chain. His story is not one of serene Olympus, but of the wild mountains, the fertile vineyards, and the shadowy spaces between sanity and divine inspiration. He is the god who arrives from the east, a stranger with a train of maenads and satyrs, bringing with him a gift that is also a curse, a blessing that is also a test. Who is this complex, compelling, and often contradictory deity? Why does his myth persist, resonating across millennia? Our journey begins in the mystery of his very origin, a tale of fire and rebirth, of a mortal mother and a divine father, a story that begins not in a palace, but in a blaze of heavenly light. The most profound mysteries often have the most tumultuous beginnings, and the origin of Dionysus is a symphony of divine passion, mortal tragedy, and miraculous survival. His mother was the beautiful Princess Semele, a mortal woman of Thebes who captured the heart of the king of the gods, Zeus. Their secret union, however, attracted the vengeful gaze of Hera, Zeus's eternally jealous wife. Disguised as an old nurse, Hera befriended the pregnant Semele and planted a seed of devastating doubt. "How can you be sure," she whispered, "that your lover is truly the Lord of Olympus? Demand that he reveal himself to you in his full, unshielded glory. Only then will you know his divine love is real." Tricked by this false counsel, Semele extracted an oath from Zeus and made her fatal request. Bound by his word, a heartbroken Zeus appeared in her chambers not as a man, but as the pure, incandescent essence of a god, the living thunderbolt. No mortal could withstand such a sight. Semele was consumed by the celestial fire, but from the ashes Zeus acted with swift purpose. He rescued the unborn Dionysus, still a sixth-month fetus, and sewed the divine child into his own thigh, a living womb of flesh and godhead. Thus, Dionysus was born a second time from the body of his father, earning the name Dionysus the Twice-Born. This extraordinary birth marks him as both of this world and utterly beyond it, a god born from a mortal's death and a god's body, forever setting him apart and infusing his nature with a fundamental tension between the mortal and the immortal, the ephemeral and the eternal. From this fiery genesis, the infant god faced immediate peril. Hera's wrath was unrelenting, and Zeus, seeking to protect his strange son, entrusted him to the care of others. In one version of the myth, he was given to the gentle rain nymphs of Mount Nysa, a mythical, mist-shrouded land sometimes said to be in the distant east. These nymphs became his first devotees, raising the divine child in a hidden valley, a secret garden of wonders. They fed him honey and taught him the secrets of the wild earth. It was here, legend says, that the young Dionysus made his first great discovery, the grapevine. He found the wild plant twisting around a tall tree, its fruit bursting with potential, and he perceived its sacred power. He learned to cultivate the vine, to harvest the grapes, and to master the mysterious process of fermentation that turned simple fruit juice into wine, a substance that could ease sorrow, inspire poetry, or unleash madness. This period of his youth was a time of idyllic seclusion, a calm before the storm of his future ministry. But Hera, ever watchful, could not be evaded forever. Her madness infected the young god, and in a fit of divine insanity, Dionysus fled the safety of Nyssa and began his great wanderings. This was not a flight of cowardice, but the beginning of his destiny, a pilgrimage that would take him to the farthest corners of the known world, spreading his cult and challenging the established order of gods and men. As Dionysus came of age, he embarked on his grand journey, a wandering evangelist of ecstasy. He was not alone. He gathered a wild and ecstatic retinue, a thyasos that was the very antithesis of civilized order. At its heart were the maenads or bacchae, women who had left their looms, their homes, and their children behind, drawn by the irresistible call of the god. Clad in fawnskins and crowned with ivy, they wielded the thyrsus, a fennel staff tipped with a pine cone, a symbol that was both a sacred scepter and a potent weapon. They danced with frenzied abandon on the mountain slopes, their voices raised in cries of "You." Their dances were so powerful they could cause the earth to bloom and milk or honey to spring from the soil. They possessed superhuman strength, able to tear apart wild animals, and sometimes men, with their bare hands in a sacred, bloody ritual known as sparagmos. Alongside them capered the satyrs, goat-legged, lustful creatures of the wild, representing the untamed, instinctual forces of nature. Their music, from the haunting notes of the double-piped aulos to the rhythmic beat of the tympanum, provided the soundtrack to this divine madness. This traveling band was a moving festival, a wave of chaos and creation that swept across the land, and their arrival at a city's gates was a test. Would the people accept the god's gifts and join his revels, or would they resist, clinging to a fragile order that the god was destined to shatter? The clash between the rigid, political order of the city-state and the raw, liberating power of Dionysus is nowhere more starkly illustrated than in the tragedy of King Pentheus of Thebes. Pentheus was a ruler of reason and law, a man who valued control above all else. When Dionysus arrived in Thebes, his own mother's city, to claim worship, Pentheus reacted not with curiosity, but with fury and contempt. He saw the god's rites as a dangerous, subversive madness infecting the women of his city, including his own mother, Agave. He ordered the foreign, effeminate priest, who was Dionysus in disguise, captured and imprisoned. From his cell, Dionysus, with calm, terrifying power, demonstrated his divinity. He caused the earth to shake and the chains to fall away. He lured Pentheus with a voyeuristic temptation, a chance to spy on the secret rites of the maenads from the safety of a tall pine tree. Blinded by his own arrogance and a strange, burgeoning fascination, Pentheus agreed. Disguised in a fawnskin and a wig, the king climbed the tree, hidden in plain sight. But the god's voice rang out across the mountainside, pointing out the wild beast in the tree. The maenads, led by the delirious Agave, were seized by a holy frenzy. They uprooted the tree with their bare hands and fell upon Pentheus. In their ecstatic state, they did not see a king, but a mountain lion. And with a mother's hands, Agave tore her own son limb from limb. The aftermath of the Dionysian frenzy is often a moment of horrific clarity. The ecstasy fades, and what remains is the brutal physical evidence of the god's power. For Agave, the return to her senses was a descent into the deepest abyss of human suffering. Cradling the bloody head of her son, which she believed to be the prize of a successful lion hunt, she proudly carried it back to Thebes, eager to show her triumph to her father, the old king Cadmus. It was only as she entered the palace, under the horrified gaze of the citizens and the pitying eyes of Cadmus, that the divine illusion shattered. "Look, father," she proclaimed, "behold the head of a young lion. I, your daughter, have hunted it down." Cadmus, his voice trembling with grief, guided her to see the truth. "Look again, my child. Look carefully. Whose face do you hold?" The realization dawned slowly, then all at once. The features of the severed head resolved not into a beast, but into the beloved face of her son, Pentheus. Her triumphant joy curdled into a scream of unimaginable agony. This moment is the ultimate lesson of Dionysus. The line between divine ecstasy and bestial savagery is terrifyingly thin. The god's gift of liberation comes with a terrible price for those who resist him with pride, or who partake without understanding. He dissolves boundaries, and in doing so, he can dissolve the very foundations of identity and family. Yet the power of Dionysus was not only one of destruction visited upon the arrogant, it was also a force of miraculous salvation and divine reward for those who recognized his divinity. The story of the Tyrrhenian pirates beautifully illustrates this gentler, yet equally formidable, aspect of the god. As the young Dionysus stood by the shore, appearing as a handsome, wealthy youth, a crew of pirates saw an easy prize. They seized him and dragged him aboard their ship, ignoring the warnings of their helmsman, who alone sensed the passenger's supernatural nature. They bound him with heavy ropes, but the bonds simply fell away, coiling like snakes on the deck. The helmsman cried out in terror, but the greedy captain mocked his fear. Then Dionysus revealed his power. A miraculous, fragrant wine began to stream across the deck. A great vine, heavy with grapes, grew instantly up the mast, its tendrils snaking across the sails. The god transformed into a lion, roaring ferociously, while a great bear appeared amidships, sent by the god. The terrified pirates, driven mad with fear, leaped overboard into the sea, where Dionysus, in his final act of transformative magic, turned them into dolphins. Only the pious helmsman was spared, instructed by the god to sail on to his next destination. This myth shows Dionysus as a god of sudden, wondrous metamorphosis, who rewards faith and punishes hubris, and whose essence can transform the very nature of reality, turning men into beasts and beasts into men, and sailors into the playful, intelligent creatures of the deep. Dionysus's journey was not confined to the land of the living. His power extended even into the shadowy realm of Hades, the underworld. Driven by a profound love for his mortal mother, Semele, whom he had never known, the god descended into the land of the dead. This was a feat attempted by few and achieved by even fewer. He did not go as a conqueror with sword and shield, but as a god, his very presence a challenge to the finality of death. The myths are vague on the details of his passage, but they agree on the outcome. Dionysus confronted the rulers of the underworld, Hades and Persephone, and successfully pleaded for his mother's release. He led Semele out of the darkness and up to the bright light of Olympus, where Zeus granted her immortality, and she was renamed Thyone, the Inspired One. This act completed the cycle of his own extraordinary birth, rescuing the mother who had been destroyed by his father's glory. It cemented his title as a liberator, a Lycius, one who sets free. He frees men from their cares through wine, from their inhibitions through ecstatic dance, and in this most personal of missions, he freed his own mother from the ultimate prison of death itself, proving that his vitality was so potent it could, even if only once, reverse the irreversible. Beyond the thrilling narratives of confrontation and descent, the worship of Dionysus took on structured, yet profoundly transformative forms in the ancient world. The most famous were the Dionysia, major festivals held in his honor. The rural Dionysia in winter was a rustic, communal celebration, featuring processions with giant phala, symbols of fertility and generative power, masked revelers, and competitions in singing and dancing. The city Dionysia in spring was a massive, state-sponsored event in Athens, the birthplace of Greek tragedy. Here, the ecstatic cries of the Maenads were formalized into the choruses of plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. The theater itself was considered a sacred space of Dionysus. The masks worn by actors were not mere props, they were instruments of transformation, allowing the performer to shed their own identity and become another, channeling the god's power of metamorphosis. Participants in the rituals, whether in the wild or the theater, underwent a form of ecstasies, a stepping outside of oneself. In this liminal state, social hierarchies dissolved. A slave could be the equal of a master, a woman could act with a freedom denied to her in public life. This controlled release of social pressure was, paradoxically, a cornerstone of the very civilization that the god's wildness seemed to threaten. He provided the necessary valve for the pressures of a structured society, a sacred madness that, by being given its due, helped preserve the sanity of the city. The symbolism of Dionysus is as rich and layered as a fine wine. Every element associated with him tells a story. The grapevine and the ivy are his sacred plants. The vine, which must be pruned back brutally in winter only to burst forth with new life in spring, represents death and resurrection, echoing his own story. Ivy, an evergreen, symbolizes enduring life and fidelity, but it is also a parasite that clings and eventually strangles its host, reflecting the dual nature of his gifts. The thyrsus, his staff, appears as a harmless fennel stalk but can become a weapon, a symbol of the latent power within his seemingly soft followers. The leopard and the panther, animals that often draw his chariot, represent the untamed, exotic, and dangerous nature of the wilderness he commands. Even the dolphin, into which he transformed the pirates, is a complex symbol, a creature of the deep that breathes air, a bridge between two worlds, just as Dionysus himself is a bridge between the human and the divine, the civilized and the wild, life and death. His mask is perhaps his most potent symbol. It represents the fluidity of identity, the hidden God within the mortal form, and the theatrical nature of existence itself, where nothing is quite as it seems, and divinity can be hidden in the most unexpected of vessels. The influence of Dionysus did not fade with the fall of the Greek city-states. He was adopted and adapted by the Romans as Bacchus, and his rites, the Bacchanalia, became so notorious for their perceived depravity and political intrigue that the Roman Senate sought to suppress them in 186 BCE. Through the Renaissance, artists like Titian and Caravaggio rediscovered him, captivated by the themes of sensual pleasure, earthly bounty, and theatrical drama he embodied. In the modern era, the spirit of Dionysus has been powerfully resurrected in the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. In his work The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche identified the Dionysian as the primal, chaotic, and ecstatic force of nature, which stands in eternal tension with the Apollonian, the principle of order, rationality, and beautiful form. This framework has become a cornerstone for understanding art, psychology, and culture. The god of the vine finds his echoes in the ecstatic rhythms of a rock concert, the collective abandon of a carnival, the transformative power of psychedelic experiences, and even in the dark allure of the vampire myth, a being of irresistible charm and terrifying hunger, offering a form of immortality. He is the patron saint of all that is irrational, intuitive, and uncontrollable in the human experience, a necessary counterbalance to the hyper-rational, structured world we have built. And so, the mystery of Dionysus endures. He is the god who arrives in the twilight, at the crossroads of sanity and madness, order and chaos, life and death. He is the stranger who offers a cup that is both poison and cure. His story teaches us that to deny the wild, instinctual, and ecstatic parts of our nature is to invite the very destruction we fear, as King Pentheus learned so tragically. Yet to embrace them without wisdom or respect is to be lost forever in the maelstrom, like the Maenads in the bloody aftermath of their revels. Dionysus represents the fundamental truth that life is not a static state to be controlled, but a dynamic, flowing, and often terrifying process of creation and destruction. He is the vital sap in the vine, the frenzied beat of the drum, the liberating truth spoken in wine, and the terrifying silence that follows the scream. He is the mask that reveals more than it hides. In the end, Dionysus is not just a figure from a long-dead mythology. He is a perpetual invitation to step outside the confines of our own egos, to lose ourselves in order to find a deeper, more connected, and more vibrant self, and to remember that even in the most civilized heart, the wild god waits. Another legend fades, but the next awaits. Like this video, subscribe and continue the journey through myths.